On January 3rd, 2026, at exactly 2:01 a.m., American helicopters touched down in Caracas, and 30 minutes later Nicolas Maduro was in custody, while $17.3 trillion of oil reserves changed hands. But this wasn't just about Venezuela, because this was the next inevitable step in a pattern that has destroyed empires for over 2,000 years. A pattern so predictable and so mathematically certain that once you understand it, you'll see it everywhere. Right now, the United States national debt stands at $38.5 trillion, growing $612 billion per day, every single day, while interest payments just crossed $1 trillion annually for the first time in history, and 142,000 millionaires are fleeing traditional wealth centers this year alone in the largest voluntary wealth migration ever recorded. And this isn't coincidence, but stage 4 of a 7-stage cycle that has toppled the Dutch guilder, the British pound, and the Roman denarius before it. The Venezuela raid isn't the beginning, but a symptom of an empire in the expansion phase desperately grabbing resources to maintain the illusion of stability. And what comes next is already written in history. So the only question is whether you'll be on the right side of the greatest wealth transfer ever recorded, because by the end of this video you'll understand exactly which stage we're in and exactly what happens next. Let me show you something that once you see it you can't unsee it. Because throughout the last 2,000 years empires rise and fall following the exact same pattern with the same sequence, same stages, and same outcome. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about Rome in 265 AD, the Dutch in 1780, Britain in 1931, or America in 2026, because the pattern is identical and it's unfolding right now. Here's how it works, starting with stage 1, which is sound money foundation. Because every empire begins the same way with sound money and real value, as the currency is backed by something tangible like gold, silver, or hard assets. And this attracts commerce, so trade flows through the empire, wealth accumulates, productive capacity expands, education flourishes, and innovation thrives. Meaning the society becomes rich through genuine productivity, not financial engineering. And this is the golden age when empires are built on real foundations. Stage 2 is expansion and social programs. Because once wealthy, the empire begins to expand. Not just military expansion, but social expansion with infrastructure projects, public works, and social programs. And these programs are initially funded by the wealth created in stage 1, including roads, aqueducts, healthcare, and education. So the society feels prosperous, the middle class grows, and quality of life improves across all sectors. But there's a subtle shift happening as the empire starts spending more on maintaining prosperity than creating it, and consumption begins to outpace production slowly and almost imperceptibly. Stage 3 is military overextension and debasement, because to maintain its global position, the empire must project power, and military might becomes expensive through protecting trade routes, maintaining overseas bases, defending allies, and engaging in conflicts that drain resources. So the costs rise faster than revenue as taxes increase, but they're never enough. And the empire makes a fateful choice where instead of cutting spending or defaulting on obligations, it debases the currency. In ancient Rome, they shaved silver from coins, while in modern times they print money. But the effect is identical as more currency chases the same amount of goods and inflation begins to creep upward. And initially this seems to work because the empire can pay its bills and the system continues functioning. But trust is eroding as foreign holders of the currency begin to notice, and they start diversifying quietly at first. Stage 4 is desperate resource acquisition. And this is where things accelerate because the empire realizes its currency is losing credibility. So it does what all empires do at this stage by going after hard assets, natural resources, and strategic materials. Anything with intrinsic value, as military operations become resource extraction missions and regime change becomes about controlling oil, minerals, and strategic infrastructure. The empire tells itself this is about security, about democracy, about fighting terrorism or drugs. But underneath, it's about one thing, which is acquiring real assets to back up an increasingly hollow financial system. And this is exactly where we are right now, because Venezuela holds 303 billion barrels of proven oil reserves at $57 per barrel, which equals $17.3 trillion. And on January 3rd, 2026, The United States took control of those reserves through a military operation that captured the country's president. And this is not a coincidence or an outlier, but stage 4 behavior and textbook empire economics. Now here's what makes this pattern so devastating. Because stage 4 doesn't stabilize the empire, but is a temporary patch on a systemic problem, as the fundamental issue of spending exceeding productive capacity hasn't been addressed. So all stage 4 does is buy time. Usually 5 to 15 years, and sometimes less. And while the empire is focused on external resource grabs, the internal problems accelerate. Stage 5 is loss of confidence. And this is when the general population begins to sense something is wrong as inflation becomes noticeable, not in economic reports, but in actual prices at the grocery store. And the middle class realizes their savings are losing purchasing power, wages don't keep up with costs, and wealth gaps widen dramatically. So those with access to hard assets prosper, while those holding cash deteriorate. Social cohesion fractures, political extremism rises, blame gets assigned, and class warfare intensifies, while foreign governments start actively diversifying away from the empire's currency. And they don't announce it loudly, but do it systematically as trade settlements shift to alternative currencies. Gold reserves increase, and bilateral agreements bypass the dominant currency. So the reserve currency status, which provided enormous privilege in earlier stages, begins to crack. Stage 6 is fiscal dominance. And here's where it gets catastrophic, because the debt has grown so large that interest payments consume a massive portion of government revenue. And the central bank faces an impossible choice, where they can raise interest rates to fight inflation, which makes the debt unpayable, or keep rates low to service the debt, which destroys the currency's purchasing power. And this is called fiscal dominance, where the government's debt is so large it dominates monetary policy. Former Fed Chair Janet Yellen just warned about this on January 5, 2026, saying that the preconditions for fiscal dominance are clearly strengthening. And the translation is that we're entering stage 6. Stage 7 is collapse and reset. And the final stage brings hyperinflation or default as currency becomes worthless and the system resets. So wealth that was stored in the dying currency evaporates as generational savings are destroyed in months, while wealth that was stored in hard assets like gold, silver, productive land, and strategic resources explodes in value relative to the collapsing currency. And this is the great wealth transfer from those who trusted the system to those who understood the pattern, and it happens every single time. Now let me prove this to you with 3 undeniable historical examples, starting with the Roman Empire. Because Rome was the eternal city and the empire that dominated the Mediterranean for nearly 500 years, and at its peak Rome controlled 50,000 miles of roads, built aqueducts that still function today, and created a legal system we still reference, while trade generated vast wealth. And the denarius, Rome's silver coin, was the global reserve currency of its time. But look at what happened, because in 64 AD under Emperor Nero, the denarius contained 94% silver, which was real money and real value. But Rome was expensive, with military campaigns, barbarian threats, and an empire spanning 3 continents. So they started the debasement by gradually reducing the silver content. And by 100 AD, it was 85% silver. By 200 AD, it was 50% silver. And then came the acceleration, as by 265 AD the denarius contained only 0.5% silver. And here's what happened to prices as they exploded 1,000% across the entire empire. Soldiers demanded higher wages as the coins became worthless. Emperor Caracalla raised military pay 50% around 210 AD just to maintain loyalty. Administrative costs soared, creating logistical nightmares. And Rome had no precious metals left to plunder from enemies. So they did what all empires do by levying more taxes on the people. Hyperinflation, soaring taxes, and worthless money created a trifecta that dissolved Rome's trade as economic activity collapsed and the wealth transfer was complete, because those holding land and gold survived while those holding denarius were destroyed. And by 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire ceased to exist. Fast forward to the 17th century with the Dutch Empire and the Dutch Golden Age, because the Dutch guilder became the world's first modern reserve currency as global commerce flowed through Amsterdam. And the Dutch East India Company was the most valuable company in human history, worth $7.9 trillion in today's dollars, while the spice trade, shipping dominance, and financial innovation thrived as the Dutch created the modern stock market. But maintaining this empire was costly with colonial possessions, naval fleets, and trade route protection. So by the 1700s, the Dutch were overextended as they became heavily indebted while internal fighting erupted between provinces, between rich and poor, and between political factions, and their military weakened, showing classic signs of late-stage empire. Then came the Fourth Anglo-Dutch War in 1780 as the British, a rising power, challenged the Dutch directly by attacking Dutch shipping and strangling their trade routes, while other competitors like France pounced on the opportunity. And the war lasted until 1784 when the British won decisively both financially and militarily, and that war bankrupted the Dutch. Their debt became unpayable, their equity markets collapsed, and the guilder, once the global reserve currency, lost its status as wealth transferred from Dutch holders to British holders, from the declining empire to the rising one, and the pattern repeated perfectly with verification that is undeniable. The British Empire was the empire on which the sun never set, and at its peak it controlled 25% of the world's landmass, while the British pound sterling was the world's dominant reserve currency for over 200 years, as London was the financial capital of the world and British ships controlled global trade routes. But by 1900, the costs of maintaining the empire were exceeding the benefits. The Gilded Age created massive wealth gaps, and Britain started borrowing excessively, while other nations like Germany, Japan, and the United States grew stronger economically and militarily. Then came World War I, which was financially devastating as Britain borrowed heavily from the United States to fund the war effort, and by 1918 Britain was a debtor nation for the first time in centuries. They tried to maintain the pound's value through struggle and manipulation, but by 1931 Britain was forced to abandon the gold standard and the pound was devalued. Still they held on, and World War II drained even more resources. So by 1944 at the Bretton Woods Conference the writing was on the wall as the US dollar, backed by 2/3 of the world's gold reserves, became the new global reserve currency. But Britain didn't let go easily as they used colonial influence to slow the transition with sterling balances held by Commonwealth countries like India, Australia, and Ireland for political reasons, not economic ones. And by 1967 came another major devaluation as the pound lost 14% of its value overnight. And here's the key, because it took over 20 years for the pound to be completely dethroned. The transition was slow, painful, and devastating for British citizens as those who held pound-denominated assets watched their wealth evaporate while those who had diversified into dollars and hard assets preserved their purchasing power. And the wealth transfer was complete with three empires across different centuries, different technologies, and different enemies, showing the same pattern, same stages, and same outcome. Now let's apply this pattern to today, to the United States, to the Venezuela raid, and to what's happening right now by walking through this systematically stage by stage with no emotion and just facts, starting with stage 1, which is sound money foundation. The United States established this in 1944 at Bretton Woods when the dollar was linked to gold at $35 per ounce, and all other currencies were pegged to the dollar, while America held 2/3 of the world's gold reserves. And this was sound money and real value, creating the foundation of American economic dominance. So the foundation was legitimate. Stage 2 is expansion and social programs. Because post-World War II America built an unprecedented welfare state with Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the interstate highway system, and public education expansion, and these programs were initially funded by genuine economic growth, including manufacturing dominance, technological innovation, and trade surpluses. So the American middle class exploded and quality of life improved dramatically across all income levels, and this was real prosperity funded by real productivity. So the expansion phase happened exactly as the pattern predicts. Stage 3 is military overextension and debasement. And this is where it started to crack with the Vietnam War, the Cold War arms race, and military bases in over 80 countries worldwide. And by the late 1960s, other nations began exchanging their dollars for gold because they noticed the overextension. On August 15, 1971, President Nixon closed the gold window, meaning no more gold backing, as the dollar became pure fiat currency backed by nothing but faith in the US government. And this was the debasement moment, the Roman coin shaving in modern version. And what happened next was inflation, because the 1970s saw double-digit inflation and the purchasing power of the dollar was cut in half within a decade. But the dollar survived because of one critical development, which was the petrodollar system. Because in 1974 the US made a deal with Saudi Arabia where oil would be priced in dollars globally, and in exchange the US would provide military protection, and this created artificial demand for dollars because countries needed dollars to buy oil, so they held dollar reserves. And this extended stage 3 by 50 years, but it didn't eliminate the pattern because it only delayed it, so currency debasement occurred exactly on schedule, and the petrodollar was a temporary patch. Now we're at stage 4, which is desperate resource acquisition, and this is where Venezuela fits. So let's look at recent history with Iraq in 2003 for oil reserves, Libya in 2011 for oil and gold reserves, Syria for strategic positioning, and now Venezuela with 303 billion barrels of oil, worth $17.3 trillion at current prices. On January 3, 2026, the United States conducted Operation Absolute Resolve by capturing President Maduro and taking control of Venezuela's government. And President Trump stated explicitly that we're going to have our very large United States oil companies go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, and start making money for the country. And the translation is we're taking the oil. But here's what's critical to understand, because this isn't sustainable, but a temporary measure, as Venezuela's oil infrastructure is gutted, and it would take $180 billion over 15 years to return to peak production levels. And even if successful, Venezuela was producing less than 1% of global oil supply. So this doesn't fundamentally change America's fiscal trajectory, but is a patch, a band-aid, and stage 4 behavior, meaning the United States is actively pursuing hard asset acquisition through military means, and the pattern is confirmed. Stage 5 is loss of confidence. And this is the stage we're entering right now. So look at the data, because in 2025 there were 142,000 millionaires who relocated internationally, which is the highest number ever recorded. While projections for 2026 show 165,000 millionaires relocating, in the largest voluntary transfer of private capital in modern history. The UK is losing 168,500 millionaires this year, representing 66 billion in liquid investable wealth. China is losing millionaires, and India is losing millionaires. And where are they going? To the UAE and Singapore, countries with zero income tax, political stability, and asset-friendly policies. And this is capital flight, as wealthy individuals sense instability and move their assets to safer jurisdictions. Meanwhile, the dollar's share of global foreign exchange reserves has declined from 71% in 2000 to 59% in 2023 as countries are diversifying, while China and Russia are settling trade in yuan and rubles, and BRICS nations are discussing alternative settlement systems. And this isn't collapse yet, but early stage 5, where the confidence is cracking, not shattered. So loss of confidence is measurable, accelerating, and following the historical pattern perfectly. Stage 6 is fiscal dominance. And here's where it gets terrifying, because U.S. national debt is $38.5 trillion, growing $612 billion per day, which equals $255 million per hour, for $0.25 million per minute, and $70,840 per second. While interest payments in 2026 will exceed $1 trillion for the first time in history, which is triple what it was in 2020, and by 2035 interest payments will reach $1.8 trillion annually. The Congressional Budget Office projects debt will reach 156% of GDP by 2055 under current law, while under alternative scenarios, if current tax cuts are made permanent, debt could reach 220% of GDP. And here's the kicker, because former Fed Chair Janet Yellen just warned on January 5, 2026, that the preconditions for fiscal dominance are clearly strengthening. As she said, if investors lose faith that the U.S. will return to running surpluses, they'll demand higher interest rates, and higher rates on $38.5 trillion of debt would be catastrophic. The Federal Reserve is trapped because they can raise rates to fight inflation, which makes the debt unpayable, or keep rates low, which destroys the currency's purchasing power. And this is fiscal dominance, where the debt is so large it controls monetary policy. So the United States is entering stage 6, and the math is undeniable. We're not at stage 7 yet, which is collapse and reset, but the pattern says this is coming. And history gives us a time frame, because once fiscal dominance sets in, the collapse phase typically takes 5 to 25 years. While some economists like Kent Smetters from Penn Wharton Budget Model project the breaking point around 2050, and others think it could happen sooner if confidence breaks suddenly through a loss of reserve currency status, a failed bond auction, or a sovereign debt crisis. The final stage always involves either hyperinflation or default, because there is no third option. And when it happens, the wealth transfer is complete, as those holding currency get wiped out while those holding hard assets survive. And we're not there yet, but every indicator is pointing in that direction, as the pattern is playing out stage by stage exactly as history predicts. Let me be absolutely clear about something, because I'm not predicting the future, but showing you a pattern that has repeated itself for 2,000 years across every major empire in recorded history, as Rome, the Dutch, and the British all followed the same 7 stages and all ended the same way. And the United States is currently in stage 4, entering stage 5, with stage 6 beginning to manifest. And this isn't opinion, but measurable data following a historical pattern. Now here's what people always say when confronted with this pattern, which is, but this time is different, because they say technology will save us through AI productivity, innovation, and American exceptionalism. So let me address this directly with reality. The Roman Empire had revolutionary technology for its time, including concrete, aqueducts, and advanced engineering, while the British Empire had the Industrial Revolution, which was the greatest technological leap in human history. But technology didn't save either empire, because the problem isn't productivity, but the relationship between spending and revenue. And when spending persistently exceeds revenue by massive margins of 6 to 7% of GDP annually, no amount of productivity growth solves that, as the US would need sustained 5 to 6% GDP growth for decades, which hasn't happened and won't happen. The British pound was the reserve currency for 200 years, yet it failed, proving that reserve currency status doesn't prevent decline, but delays it and makes the eventual fall more devastating. Because when reserve currencies collapse, they take the entire global financial system with them temporarily. Yes, technically the US can print unlimited dollars, but printing money to pay debts is hyperinflation, which isn't saving the system, but destroying it differently. So ask Weimar Germany, ask Zimbabwe, and ask Venezuela. Because printing money doesn't create wealth, but transfers wealth from holders of the currency to those who print it first. And this time isn't different, as the pattern is absolute. If the pattern holds, and it always has, we're heading toward a wealth transfer of historic proportions, not tomorrow and not next month, but within the next 10 to 25 years. And those who understand this will position accordingly, while those who don't will watch their savings evaporate. So here's what history tells us about survival strategies. Every empire collapse in history rewarded those holding tangible assets like gold, silver, productive land, and strategic resources, because when Rome collapsed, those holding land survived. When the Dutch guilder failed, those holding gold preserved wealth. And when the British pound was devalued, those who had diversified into dollars and hard assets maintained purchasing power. So the pattern is clear that hard assets retain value through monetary transitions. Specialized skills retain value regardless of currency. So if you can provide essential services like healthcare, engineering, agriculture, or skilled trades, you maintain earning capacity. And during Argentina's multiple currency crises, those with in-demand skills adapted, while those dependent on fixed income or savings were destroyed. 142,000 millionaires are relocating this year because they understand something most people don't, which is that when an empire enters late-stage decline, capital controls often follow, including wealth taxation, exit taxes, and asset confiscation. So having optionality through second residences, foreign accounts, and international business structures provides protection. And this isn't about being unpatriotic, but about recognizing historical patterns and acting rationally. The dollar will likely remain dominant for years and possibly decades, but its purchasing power will erode. So holding multiple currencies, especially those of creditor nations or commodity-backed systems, provides hedge protection, and options include China's yuan, Swiss francs, and gold-backed instruments, which won't prevent loss, but reduce concentration risk. Here's the most common mistake people make when presented with this information, which is they do nothing because they hear the analysis, understand the pattern, see the data, and then continue as if nothing has changed. And this is normalcy bias, where they think it won't happen in my lifetime, someone will fix it, or the government won't let it get that bad. But history proves otherwise every time. The Roman citizens didn't believe their empire would fall either, and the British didn't think the pound would lose reserve status. But it happened anyway, because the mathematical forces behind empire collapse don't care about beliefs. And the January 3rd operation in Venezuela isn't the cause of the wealth transfer, but a symptom of where we are in the cycle. When empires enter stage 4, they start grabbing hard assets like oil, gold, and strategic resources. And this is desperation disguised as strength, as it's a temporary measure that buys time, but doesn't solve underlying problems. And the fact that the United States felt compelled to conduct a military operation to seize oil reserves worth $17.3 trillion tells you everything about the fiscal situation. Because if the system were stable, this wouldn't be necessary. And if the dollar were truly secure, resource acquisition through force wouldn't be happening. So this is late-stage empire behavior, and the pattern asserting itself. Based on historical precedent, here's the likely sequence, where in the next 2 to 5 years we'll see increasing wealth migration, rising inflation, currency volatility, and growing social tensions. In the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see potential loss of reserve currency status or significant erosion of dollar dominance, increased capital controls, and possible sovereign debt crisis. And in the next 10 to 25 years, we'll see major monetary reset through either hyperinflation or default and complete restructuring of the global financial system. This isn't a forecast, but a historical pattern, and the time frame could be shorter if confidence breaks suddenly, or longer if the system is propped up longer than expected. But the direction is clear and the pattern is undeniable. So what do you do with this information? Because first, you educate yourself by understanding monetary history, studying empire cycles, and watching the indicators I've outlined. Second, you diversify your wealth by not holding 100% of your assets in any single currency, country, or system. Third, you acquire skills that retain value in economic transitions by becoming indispensable. Fourth, you build networks because communities survive crises better than individuals. Fifth, you position a portion of your wealth in hard assets, not through speculation, but strategic allocation based on historical preservation patterns. And finally, you stay informed because the pattern is playing out in real time. The Venezuela raid is one data point. So watch for the next moves, including more resource acquisition, rising inflation, capital controls, and social instability, because these aren't random events, but stages in a predictable cycle. And we're living through one of the most significant wealth transfers in human history. Most people won't see it until it's too late, as they'll trust the system, believe in American exceptionalism, and assume things will work out. But history says they won't, not without severe pain first. So you have a choice to understand the pattern and position accordingly, or ignore it and hope this time is different. But remember that this time is never different, because the pattern is absolute. The wealth transfer is coming. And the only question is which side of it you'll be on.